The Girls Athletic Association at Brewer High School was established in 1942 by Brewer physical education teacher Miss Laura Hoyt, a 2015 Brewer Athletic Hall of Fame inductee who served as its advisor for 26 of its 32 years. Female athletics in the early 1940s nationwide was practically non-existent. In fact, Brewer only had one sport at the time for girls: basketball. The dominant belief at the time, stemming from the late 1800s, was that physical activity for females, especially competitive sport, was hazardous, negatively affecting their femininity and fertility. Thus, opportunities for women and girls to engage in physical activity and sport were thwarted for decades as a result of this theory. The Girls Athletic Association was actually a national program that began in the 1920s to curb competition in sport. Girls Athletic Associations emphasize recreational physical activity rather than competition, so it was modestly accepted throughout the country. The Brewer Girls Athletic Association offered physical activities and intramurals in badminton, tennis, bowling, basketball, and hiking. The organization began with 17 members and grew to be over 150 members by 1973, with other activities offered over the years such as archery, field hockey, volleyball, soccer, and even flag football. The Girls Athletic Association even had a handbook. 5 to 10 points were given for each sport or activity. In the beginning, to obtain membership, a girl needed to accumulate 50 points and pay dues of 25 cents. After earning a particular number of points, the girls earned awards. For the first award, they earned their felt numerals of their graduating class. For the second award, they earned their school B. For the third award, they earned a State of Maine letter. And the fourth award, the girls earned a State of Maine pin and state certificate. The interest and success of the Brewer Girls Athletic Association was so great in the 1940s that Miss Hoyt was able to convince the administration to offer softball as an interscholastic varsity team sport, and in 1947, Brewer's first girls softball team formed. The team, coached by Hoyt, went undefeated and were the 1947 PVC champions and remained champions for 4 years in a row. By 1952, out of the 22 schools in Maine that operated under the GAA system, the Brewer Girls Athletic Association was one of the 2 highest in the state in number of awards. Through the years, the Brewer Girls Athletic Association financially supported all girls intramural and varsity sports, as their mere existence depended on it, raising money through concessions at basketball and football games to fund their programs, buy awards, purchase equipment and uniforms. The Girls Athletic Association even donated money to floodlights and new bleachers for Doyle Field. In the 1940s and 50s, the main purpose of the Girls Athletic Association was recreation-focused, to develop friendliness, teamwork, and sportsmanship, and to offer sports for as many girls as possible. It perpetuated societal expectations that a woman's place was in the home, which pushed aside the idea that there were benefits to be gained from involvement in competitive sport. But in the 1960s, the social conscience of America was changing. Girls were pushing limits in sport and proving they could exert themselves, yet still maintain societal expectations of femininity and fertility. This increasingly positive attitude toward girls in sport, particularly competitive sports, was felt here in Maine and at Brewer High School. The spring of 1964 was the inauguration year of the Olympic Sports Day, a 12-event track and field competition for Maine's high school girls, the first of its type in the nation, and the first statewide competition for girls in Maine in any sport. Known in the professional community as a mover in the girls' athletic equal rights movement, it is no surprise that Laura Hoyt was one of the founding organizers of the Olympic Sports Day. She also served as the coach for the Brewer girls participants. Of the 53 schools that participated at the first annual Olympic Sports Day at Garland Street Field in Bangor, Brewer scored more athletes in the top 3 than any other school in the state. Brewer girls had immense success at the yearly Olympic Sports Days. In the 9 years of Olympic Sports Day, Brewer won 16 individual events, setting 6 individual state records. Brewer's Darlene Ford set 4 of those state records, and she became the first high school girl in Maine to clear 5 feet in the high jump. Brewer also won 7 relay events and set 3 state relay records, including the 1966 200-yard shuttle relay that missed the national record by 1/10 of a second. Brewer girls track had emerged like a phoenix rising to be one of the most dominating programs in the state. 2 of Brewer's best track and field athletes, Darlene Ford and Olympic Sports Day 4-time event winner Wanda Kirkpatrick, proudly wearing their Brewer warm-ups, were qualifiers representing Brewer at nationals. Brewer girls' outdoor track and field succeeded despite the lack of access to equipment and facilities. The success of the Brewer Olympic Sports Day participants got their photo in the Trident, but little else. Although the Brewer girls won events and set state records, they received little to no recognition for their efforts, no parades or lavish banquets. For years, the girls did not have uniforms. They had to wear their gym clothes, a white button-down blouse and gym shorts with Velcro straps tightened around the thigh, which they had to pay for themselves, while the members of the boys' track team were supplied uniforms and warm-ups by the school. The girls had little access to equipment, always having to wait until the boys were done, and for several years, they merely practiced in preparation for Olympic Sports Day with no other competitions. Because the physical education teacher was the track coach and the softball coach, by the late 1960s, the track girls were lucky to have 3 meets a season. The push for civil rights in the early 1960s gave birth to a wave of feminist activism which propelled the movement for women's rights forward and called for greater equal treatment in athletics. By the late 1960s and early 70s, Brewer girls demanded less recreational participation and more competitive opportunities. Coaches and advisors on staff at Brewer High School, like Phyllis Worthley and Jim White, lobbied on behalf of the female athletes at Brewer. But it was the Girls Athletic Association members themselves who fought for their sports and for the ability to compete at the varsity level. In particular, one brave female athlete, Katherine Higgins, stood up to shine a light on the inequities between girls and boys athletics at Brewer. In June of her senior year in 1973, Ms. Higgins wrote a letter to the editor in response to an article published in the Bangor Daily News just weeks prior about the lack of track equipment at Brewer.
I vividly remember the picture of Coach McDougall standing in front of either the high jump pit or the pole vault pit, which was just these big bags of old foam. With this dejected look on his face saying, oh, poor us, we only get $2,000 a year for track, and Brewer doesn't have a track, but they have this really successful boys track program. And it just really bothered me because the girls track team had nothing. We barely had a coach because the girls gym teacher, Phyllis Worthley at the time, was coaching softball, so she couldn't be coaching track at the same time. We did have some volunteers at different years that helped out, but basically we were on our own.
In response to the Bangor Daily News track article, Ms. Higgins pointed out in her letter that an obscure statistic failed to get due notice. Boys track received $2,000 for an annual budget, and all 7 girls' sports combined only received $1,000. She had done her homework, learning that of the $25,000 budget for athletics, boys' sports were allotted just shy of $24,000, with only $1,000 earmarked to the entire girls' athletic program. In her eloquent and powerful letter, she pointed out not only financial inequities, but also inequities in uniforms and access to equipment and coaching.
I remember when it got printed, I was so excited. And I had Mrs. Worthley, check my facts, make sure it was accurate. And I was called into the principal's office, which for me was a big deal. And I remember being scared to death. And I remember sitting there and him telling me he didn't think it was proper for a student to criticize the school. I was just petrified. And I remember leaving there crying, going down to Mrs. Worthley's office, and she was very supportive.
As she graduated a week after her letter was published, Catherine Higgins and her Olympic Sports Day teammates and GAA classmates never saw the changes that would eventually come to women's athletics at Brewer. The view of the female athlete was evolving, especially in the early 70s. Even the girls' basketball team, after 40 years of 6-on-6 basketball, where no one could cross the center line for the belief that running full court would exhaust the girls, and another decade where 2 girls called rovers were allowed to play the whole court, Brewer finally began playing full court 5-on-5 basketball during the 1971-72 season. The Brewer girls saw this as a welcome, exciting opportunity to a rather boring 6-on-6 game. In 1972, Title IX was passed into law. This landmark gender equity federal law is famous for its impact on expanding opportunities for women and girls in sports. One of the most immediate positive changes as a result of Title IX was in 1973. The name of Olympic Sports Day changed to what it is referred to today, the Maine State Championships for Girls Outdoor Track and Field. As a result of Title IX and the firm foundation laid for interest in sports and competition through the Brewer Girls Athletic Association, 6 of the 9 interscholastic varsity sports introduced at Brewer High School between 1970 and 1989 were women's sports: girls indoor track, field hockey, girls tennis, girls swimming and diving, girls cross country, and girls soccer. Even today, girls sports at Brewer High School are still emerging. Since 2018, over the last 5 years, volleyball, lacrosse, and ice hockey have been added to the girls' varsity offerings. In 1942, there was only one varsity sport offered to girls at Brewer. Today, there are 17 sports, with girls having equal opportunity to participate in sports like football and golf. As a result of the Girls Athletic Association at Brewer, nearly 900 girls between 1942 and 1974 had athletic experiences that were previously unavailable to them. As more varsity opportunities were established for girls in the years following Title IX, the Brewer Girls Athletic Association came to an end in 1974. Yet their legacy lives on, and we celebrate them as pioneers in the evolution of female athletics at Brewer High School and their role in the world of competitive sports. The year 2022 marks the 80th anniversary of the formation of the Brewer Girls Athletic Association and the 50th anniversary of Title IX. The impact the Brewer Girls Athletic Association had on the establishment and success of girls' sports at Brewer High School was profound. They gave birth to the female student athlete. It is for these reasons the Brewer Girls Athletic Association is bestowed the prestigious Historical Legacy Award, which honors those who have made a historical impact in Brewer athletics. And we are honored to induct the Girls Athletic Association into the Brewer Athletic Hall of Fame.